This is a 1995 Daihatsu Mira, which is a tiny little Japanese hatchback that wouldn't be notable at all, except that this is the Mira TR-XX Avanzato R4, the high-performance version. Now, the name is a little much, but the car is cool. A little tiny hatchback with a splash of fun thrown in. And today I'm going to review this Mira and show you all of its quirks and features. Before I get started, big news, this Daihatsu Mira is currently for sale and it's being auctioned live on Cars and Bids. This little car is a great example of having fun driving a slow car fast. It's slow and tiny, but it feels exciting and enjoyable to drive, and it can be yours on Cars and Bids. So, once you finish watching this video, click the link in the description below to visit the live auction for this Mira TR-XX Avanzato R4, where you can bid on it and buy it only on Cars and Bids. All right, time for the quirks and features of the Daihatsu Mira TR-XX Avanzato R4. That is insanely the full name of this car. And it's a Kei Car, which is a Japanese vehicle size classification created by the government in order to incentivize people to drive smaller cars. They're called Kei Cars, and they have to fit into very specific dimensions, and if you get a car that small to make it easier to move around in cities, then you get a break on your registration fees, your taxes, your insurance by getting a Kei Car. And the rules are very strict. Kei Cars have to be less than 134 inches long, they have to be less than 660 cc's for the engine, and they have to have 63 horsepower or less. This car is 131 inches long, it has 659 cc's, and it has exactly 63 horsepower. They're really pushing it all the dimensions, everything they can get away with in order to create this vehicle. And while 63 horsepower doesn't sound like much, this car's 63 horses come from a turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, which is actually a pretty big deal because most Kei Cars have 3-cylinder engines, and a lot of them don't even get close to the 63 horsepower maximum. In fact, the base model Daihatsu Mira from this era used a naturally aspirated 40 horsepower 3-cylinder engine, and it was surely not the hoot that the TR-XX Avanzato R4 is. But this car has a lot more upgrades over the standard Daihatsu Mira than just a larger engine and horsepower that's at the very top of the Kei Car regulation. It goes a lot further than that, so let's start under the hood, where you can see a strut tower brace, the universal sign for an automaker that's focused on handling. Putting that in the car definitely does make the chassis a little bit stiffer and make it a little sportier. You also have an intercooler under here, the world's smallest intercooler. It's about the size of my hand, but there is an intercooler. It's a tiny engine, doesn't need much, and it works. Now, with the turbocharger and the 4-cylinder twin cam, you can see 16-valve engine. It's a pretty big deal. The result of all of that is that this car has an 8,500 RPM redline, which is pretty insane. The Acura NSX from this same era redlines at 8,000 RPM, so you can really wring this thing out to go and get all of your available 63 horses. And the fun doesn't stop there. This car comes standard with a limited slip differential to improve handling. They put an LSD in a tiny little Kei Car. It's ridiculous, but they did it. And probably this car's greatest claim to fame is that it's all-wheel drive. All the other Kei Cars were two-wheel drive. Some were rear, most were front, but putting an all-wheel drive system inside this footprint, not the easiest thing to do, but they did it to maximize this car's handling and racetrack capabilities. And in fact, that's where the 4 in its name comes from. The TR-XX Avanzato R4. There was a regular Avanzato R that was just a front-wheel drive car, but if you stepped up to the R4, you got the limited slip diff and you got 4-wheel drive. Pretty cool. And amazingly, even with all-wheel drive and all the other upgrades to this car, it still only weighs in at around 1,500 pounds. It's just tremendously tiny. Now, despite the very small footprint and the low curb weight, 63 horsepower still isn't enough to make it a total blast, crazy acceleration, nothing like that. But this car was considered one of the supremely sporty Kei cars. In fact, it was always in a close rivalry with the Suzuki Alto Works as the most high-performance Kei car hatchback. Now, there were some Kei cars that were dedicated sports cars, like the Honda Beat and the AutoZam AZ1, but among Kei cars that became sporty and kept their practical Kei car dimensions, it was this and the Alto Works. They were always fighting it out for the best of the best, and both cars are still sort of beloved icons among high-performance Kei cars even to this day. But anyway, beyond all the performance stuff, onto some other interesting quirks and features of this car. Let's start around back, where I truly love the dual rear spoilers. You got an upper and a lower rear spoiler. The lower one has a handle in it, an opening. It's a handle for the tailgate in part, but it also makes way for the rear wiper to be able to wipe the rear window. And I love the fact that because of that, it's actually offset. This handle is not dead center on the car. It's a little over to the side, so it's not perfectly symmetrical. I also love that this rear spoiler continues around the side of the car to the point where they actually have tacked on an extra spoiler bit onto the rear fender on both sides just to emphasize the performance and the sportiness. And indeed, they also did that with a body kit. You can see this car wears a pretty good body kit, sort of going all the way down and really emphasizing its low center of gravity and its performance, just like, well, a real performance car would have had in this day. And of course, since we're talking about the body kit, we got to talk in that vicinity, the badging. You can see on the side the pink badging TRXX really tries to make sure people are aware of what this is. It's very cool and very period correct to have badging that looks like that color in that place. And you can see the same thing around back. TRXX Avanzato R4 printed here on the rear bumper in a very sort of mid-90s font and mid-90s way to announce the specialness of this car. One other interesting quirk of badging is up front, you don't have a Daihatsu badge. You can see it says Mira up here, and in fact, it doesn't say Daihatsu anywhere on this car. Now, that's not because Daihatsu was ashamed of their brand. Actually, this was pretty common in the 90s in Japan. A lot of cars had their own badging for their model and wouldn't have badging for their brand. It was pretty common on a lot of vehicles, even up to the Nissan Skyline and some of its rivals, including the Daihatsu Mira. Now, up front, you can also see not just the headlights, but the big fog lights, which are integrated into the front part of this body kit. And it's intended to look, I think, like a junior rally car. Like if you couldn't afford a WRX, which was just getting popular around this time, or a Mitsubishi Evo, you could get one of these and also have all-wheel drive, a manual transmission, a turbo, and a big body kit with big front fog lights. One other noticeable item up front, you can see the license plate up front, which does say Daihatsu, is mounted off-center. That is the factory mounting point because the radiator was mounted off-center on the other side of the grille. And if they had stuck the radiator in the center, it would have conflicted with the license plate. So they are mounted apart from each other so the radiator can get full airflow and do its job cooling the car. Kind of funny. But anyway, next we climb inside the Mira TRXX Avanzato R4, where there are a surprising amount of quirks considering how small this car is. We start with the seats, which you can see are sort of heavily bolstered and have this cool pattern and say Avanzato stitched into the headrest. They really want to emphasize the performance, and they do that with the seats. More than the seats, though, I love the floor mats, which are a laughable 90s treat. You have the Mira badge font kind of mixed in with this very 90s sort of pastel colors and shapes on both sides. I love that floor mat situation. I also love the wood trim in this car. In the center control stack, you can see wood trim in here. It might be aftermarket, although I'm not entirely sure. Either way, I love the way that it extends to the switches for the climate controls. Not just wood trim, but wood switches, so you can touch them and really feel the plastic wood. I also like in the climate controls that your options for air conditioning are cool, mild, or off. Heat, Heat is not given as an option here. And what even is mild? Is it like less air conditioning? There's a separate dial where you can adjust the temperature. So why would you need this? I'm not sure, but you have it just in case. One other thing I like here in the center control stack, below the stereo, you can see there are two little panels. One is labeled drink holder. You pull that out and there's a couple of very small flimsy cup holders in there. The other one is labeled free box. And the reason for that is it's a box that's free. You can choose to do whatever you want with that box. I assume these are also aftermarket, but they are kind of hilarious. They're not practical at all, but they do exist. Now, certainly not aftermarket, something I love, is the window switch situation. Over on the passenger door panel, you can see they just sort of tacked on a window switch, which is fine. It's a little cheap car. It makes sense to do it that way. The driver's door panel, they have completely different window switches, which are actually mounted on something of an armrest, totally separate from what you have on the passenger side. And I love that there's two window switches for the front windows, and then behind it, where there should be the two rear window switches, you instead have coin holders. And strangely enough, they are separated into two sections, these coin holders, even though they are the exact same size. So it's not like you're separating out pennies or dimes or whatever the Japanese equivalent would be. They are literally identical, obviously placed there just because they use this same part in cars that do have power rear window. And instead of making one coin holder that joined, they made two separate ones because it was cheaper and easier. And speaking of cheaper and easier, I love the fact that in the passenger footwell, there is this. I actually don't know what this is. Some sort of mechanical piece, though. It hangs down into the passenger footwell. I hope you weren't expecting any leg room. Also noticeable down here, there's a little hole kind of styled into the plastic, the trim in the passenger footwell. That hole is for a road flare. For many years, and maybe even still today, cars in Japan were required to be operated with a road flare in the car in case you broke down. You would put the flare out so other drivers could see you. And because it was compulsory and so common, they actually started putting flare slots inside cars where you would put your road flare if you were operating a Japanese car in this period. And next, a few other interesting things in here. For one, this car amazingly has back seats. You fold the seat forward and you can see there are back seats in here, and they take up basically the entire rest of the car. There's nothing notable or interesting about the back seats here. They have seat belts, they're back seats, they work. Again, the Kei Car restriction was intended to make practical small cars, and obviously this car with 2 rows of seats was that to an extent. Maybe more interesting is the cargo area. You open up the tailgate, you can see a very tiny cargo area with a very tiny cargo cover, and mounted on the cover there are speakers that actually can lift up with the cargo cover and sort of be moved in case you have larger items. Now normally I would say that cargo cover mounted speakers are an aftermarket component of a car, but in this case they actually have the Mira branding on them using the same Mira logo that you see elsewhere on the car. So I guess these came factory. There wasn't another place for rear speakers, so they just stuck them on the cargo cover, and that's what you got. Sort of the realities of a tiny little car and figuring out space for everything. But anyway, those are your quirks and features of this car. Obviously, another big quirk is the driving experience. A high-performance, turbocharged, all-wheel drive Kei Car. I don't know what to expect. Let's find out. All right, driving the Daihatsu Mira TRXX Avanzato R4. It's an incredibly long name for an incredibly small car. Ferrari makes a performance hatchback, they're like the FF. Daihatsu makes a performance hatchback, they're like the Mira Avanzato TRXX R4, for God's sake. First impression driving this car is it is a peppy, eager little car. It weighs nothing. It feels as though it weighs nothing. It drives eager. The powertrain is eager. It's like ready to go. Like you start going, you start putting some gas into it, and the car just sort of like bursts to life in this wonderful little cute car way that's kind of nice and charming. It really is a very eager, very excited little car. And actually, it feels pretty quick. I'm surprised 0 to 60 is only 10 point whatever, because it feels a lot quicker than that. Although my suspicion is that 0 to 60 wasn't really the goal, because a lot of people, I mean, in Japan, these Kei cars were designed for like in-city use. They were probably intended to be more like 0 to 30 cars. And this one actually feels pretty peppy, 0 to 30. It's got a real kick to it. It has some real support, some real performance, and it feels more torquey than I would expect. There is really no lag on the throttle at all, which is kind of nice. Considering it revs to 8,500, I figured, and it's turbocharged, I figured it would have a lot of lag. That is not the situation. It doesn't feel laggy at all. Maybe in the first, just in the first initial tip in, but then now already the throttle is kicked in and it feels starting to feel pretty strong, which is kind of cool. Now, drawback is obvious. If you're not into little cars, you won't like this car. Like, this is as little as a little car gets. It is a tiny, tight little thing. It has no substantialness to it at all. And it does not drive more substantial than it is. I get into some little cars and I feel, oh yeah, this is pretty. That's not the case here. This one is a little car that feels little. My leg is resting against the door, which is only about 3 inches wide. And so I'm very cognizant of the fact that if I get hit from the side, the car that's hitting me is basically hitting me. And if anything, the door will act as a force multiplier. Peppy little thing now. And purportedly it has a front limited slip differential, and there is no torque steer. So I kind of have the feeling that that may in fact be the case. I'm excited to go around a corner and see how that feels. Man, this thing is just peppy and fun. This is a fun little car, but then I go for a bump and I get like rocked, and it's like, okay, yeah, I forgot this is a 1,500-pound car. Obviously, the term go-kart for the road is overused, and that's not quite the situation here. This car isn't quite fast enough or quite have like the sort of weight balance that a go-kart has, but from an overall size perspective, it certainly feels like I am driving I did a review of a meter-made car a long time ago, and this doesn't feel that far away from that. Yeah, there is zero torque steer, and it corners very predictably and solidly. Obviously, you know, I think of this as a front-wheel drive car, but it is an all-wheel drive car, and that must be the all-wheel drive kicking in. This car just feels dead flat, very predictable cornering. The steering isn't the most precise. It's not the quickest to turn, which is a bit of a shame, because that's one of the things you're hoping for when the curb weight is so low that you can get like a really tight toss-it-around car. But that's one of the reasons I say it's not that go-karty. It does not feel like ultra-frenetic or loose, or you're uncertain of what's going on, even though it's a 30-plus-year-old car. When you go over a bump and you're like, yep, I'm in a little car. But it does a really good job of steering in a predictable manner, nice, easy cornering, and again, no torque steer, no oversteer, no understeer. Surprisingly, it just kind of does exactly what you're hoping for. A lot of Kei cars are really boring and stupid, and automakers putting effort into Kei cars is fun. And so sometimes they have dump truck beds, or sometimes they're a Honda Beat or an AutoZam with gullwing doors in a Kei car. But this is another good example. Like, I guarantee the base level Daihatsu Mira is one of the most boring cars ever to exist. But within these constraints of a Kei car, they've actually made something pretty brilliant here. And honestly, the shifter and clutch are great. The clutch is pretty vague, as it was the case with so many Japanese cars from this era, but the shifter is nice and notchy and easy to get into gear, as was the case of so many good Japanese performance cars from this era. And I would definitely put this on the list of Japanese performance cars. Like, it may be a Kei car, but it punches above its literal weight class in terms of how it drives and how it feels. And I'm having fun in this car. I'm surprised, but I really am having fun in this car.
And so that's the 1995 Daihatsu Mira TRXX Avanzato R4. This is actually a pretty enjoyable little car. It certainly isn't the fastest or the coolest looking thing around, but it actually packs a lot of fun into its tiny footprint and its tiny engine. It's pretty neat to drive, and you can get this one on Cars and Bids. Anyway, now it's time to give this little Daihatsu a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 39 out of 100, which puts the little Mira TRXX here against some sort of similar cars. This little Daihatsu is actually more exciting than I expected, with a lively feel and decent handling. It's also really affordable and relatively practical, and all-wheel drive adds a certain wow factor you don't expect from a Kei car. It's not as fun as a Honda Beat or an AutoZam, but certainly more practical, and it's neat to check out this Kei car legend.